Preparing to live stream meeting.
Yung page. Wag mong wag group, wag timeline. Page.
Yes. And we're live now at Facebook.
Right. Hi everyone, good evening. This is
Good evening.
Good evening po. Okay. Miss Deloisa, kindly mute your microphone po. Thank you. Okay, so good evening everyone. Good evening Middle East. So I am Gladys. I am one of the moderator and administrator of IFNG. With me, Mr. M. So Mr. M, kindly introduce our...
Hi, good evening everyone in the Philippines and good afternoon Middle East. And we're privileged again to have Sir Irvin as our reviewer for tonight, and we will conduct a review session for reading. And Sir Irvin, welcome again to IFNG.
Okay, shall we start?
Yes, let's go.
Okay, so for the benefit of those who have just entered the Zoom meeting room, and for the others who are watching us live on Facebook, IFNG shared the passage, the reading passage that we'll be using for tonight. So if you have time, kindly visit the Facebook page of IFNG and save the reading passage so that later there wouldn't be any interruptions. So you'll know it's the right passage if you see 3 pages, okay? So make sure to save that one because this is not just a lecture. We're going to do a guided exercise. So let me share my screen. Share screen. Okay. There you go. Can you see it now? Can you see my MS Word document? I just need to open the chat box.
Clear.
Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our free IELTS classes. This is our 4th week. The first week, we focused on speaking. The second week, writing task 2. Last week, writing task 1. And for tonight, we're going to talk about the reading subtest. So reading is the second subtest in the written exams. It always comes after listening. It's just that there are instances when reading comes first and not listening. It only happens 1% of the time. And when does this happen? Only when there are technical issues or technical difficulties with the listening audio file. So please be prepared that if you belong to that 1% of the time, there might be a possibility for reading to come first before listening. If listening and speaking are exactly the same for all IELTS candidates, well, for reading, there is a slight difference between academic and general training. So academic passages are always longer and the questions are a little more complex. What about general training passages? Sometimes just 1 page, sometimes up to 2 pages. But on the average, there are 750 words for the reading subtest of the general training module. What about the academic passages? All the time, 2 pages. And what's the average? 1,500 words. So imagine how many words you are going to read in just 60 minutes. A total of 4,500 words. Now, between the two, which one is easier? Is it academic or general training? The answer is, it's always the general training module. So a lot of people are asking, sir, knowing that GT is easier than academic, can I just take the general training module? The answer is no, because in IELTS, you have to take the correct module. The moment you take the wrong module, you are required to repeat all the 4 subtests in the IELTS. Before we proceed, I just want to make sure that everyone knows which module they are going to take. Kindly comment me on the chat box, just in case you are not yet sure if it's academic or general training that you are supposed to take. Do we have anyone who is still unsure? Well, Antoinette is telling us that she is taking academic. What about the others? Do we have candidates who are not yet sure? No feedback means everyone is sure. Okay. Now, Let's take a look at module number 2, reading. Kindly direct your attention to our screen. So it says here there are approximately 3 passages. How many points per passage? 13 to 14 points. So if you do the mathematics, grand total in reading, 40 points, exactly the same number of points as the listening subtest. Now, what's the main difference between listening and reading? For paper-based IELTS, the test supervisor in listening will give you extra time to review your work and transfer your answers to the answer sheet. It's just that in the reading subtest, there is no more extra time for you to transfer your answers. You're given 1 hour to do everything. Read, review, and transfer your answers. Previously, we've discussed the difference between paper-based reading and computer-delivered reading. It's just that if you missed the first 3 Wednesdays of our free IELTS lecture series, here we go. If you're taking paper-based IELTS, definitely you cannot, if you're taking paper-based IELTS, you cannot change the font size, you cannot change the font color, because only computer-delivered IELTS will allow you to adjust the font size and the font color. One more thing, for paper-based IELTS, you don't have a choice, but you really have to flip from one page to another, because there is this tendency that the questions are not found on exactly the same page as the passage. However, for computer-delivered IELTS, the screen is divided into 2. So left-hand side portion of the screen, there you will find the passage. You just have to scroll up and down. Right-hand side portion of the passage, there you will find the questions. So scrolling up and down, that's what you're supposed to do. For paper-based reading, how do you highlight the keywords in the passage? You use your Mongol number 2 to underline and circle or highlight the keywords. However, if you're taking computer-delivered IELTS, you have to use your computer mouse to highlight the key words. Class, let's take a look at the time allotment. So in here, it states that you're given 60 minutes to read, answer, and transfer. My question is, if you are given 3 passages and there are 60 minutes. Now, how many minutes are ideal for you to spend for one passage? Kindly comment on the chat box. My classes are always live and interactive, so I want you guys to participate. Common sense dictates, how many minutes are we supposed to spend per passage if we're given 60 minutes in reading? Okay, so Anne said 20. Well, that's simple mathematics. It's just that 9.09er does not necessarily recommend 20 minutes per passage. Because imagine, if you just have enough time to read and answer, what about the time to review your work and transfer your answers if you are taking or rather transfer your answers if you're taking the paper-based IELTS. So the suggestion of 9.09, 15 minutes per passage, so that you can utilize the remaining 15 minutes in number 1, reviewing your work, and number 2, transferring the answers to the answer sheet. Now, I have mentioned earlier that if there are 40 points and 3 passages, most likely 13 to 14 points per passage. And you have 15 minutes to find the answers to these 13 to 14 questions. If that is the case, the 9.09er does not recommend that you spend more than 1 minute in answering one question. I just don't get it why some people devote so much time in answering one difficult question. Most of them are saying, sir, I want to prioritize difficult questions because difficult questions are more important than easy questions. Guys, I want to know your thoughts. Do you agree or disagree with that? That difficult questions are more important than easy questions. Agree or disagree? Okay, Tonette said disagree. Jen, disagree. Well, all of you who responded are correct. Imagine, they're both worth 1 point. So whether it's easy or difficult, you're going to get just 1 point for that. Imagine you're spending 5 minutes answering one difficult question, and yet your answer is wrong. You could have used that what? 5 minutes in answering 5 easier questions. So here is my recommendation now. The moment you feel that you're already taking so much time in answering one question, stop doing that. You answered the question using gut feel, what you think is right, and after that, you put an asterisk mark. So what's the purpose of putting an asterisk mark on your test booklet? That is to remind you you are unsure, that you just have to go back to this later on. It's just that I hope you do not write an asterisk mark on all 40 items, because what's the point of writing an asterisk mark if you're going to write exactly the same asterisk for all of the 40 points in the reading subtest? Now, we're done with time management. Let us go back to our slide, or our screen rather. Let's take a look at the usual passing score. So if I may reiterate, in IELTS, there is no such thing as pass or fail. Remember, your IELTS result won't tell you congratulations. Your IELTS result won't tell you take the examination again. Instead, what will your IELTS result tell you? Here's your score when you took the examination. Because the truth of the matter is, each country has its own preferred band score. Within one country, the target band score even varies from one visa to another. That is why it is possible for someone to get a grade of 5 and still consider himself an IELTS passer. It is also possible for someone aspiring to migrate to Australia to get a 7.5, but still would consider himself a retaker in the IELTS. That is because of the band score requirements per visa per country. So let's direct our attention to the typical requirements. So if you're a skilled worker applying for working visa, 5.0. Now, for immigrants, this is the case for Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. It says case-to-case basis, because if you're migrating to these 3 countries, this is how it works. The higher your score in IELTS general training, the higher the immigration points. And with higher immigration points, more chances for you to be invited. Which means to say, 6 might be the minimum grade for immigrant visa applicants, but it does not necessarily guarantee an immigrant visa. I can only guarantee your immigrant visa if you score at least 8 in all components. Well, at least that is applicable for Australia. Now, for student visa, it also says case-to-case basis. Remember that not all schools have exactly the same requirement, and within one school, PhD will definitely require a higher mark as compared to master's degree or bachelor's degree or a diploma course. That's why for immigrant visa applicants and student visa applicants, do not forget to ask your immigration agent or your visa consultant what grade is required from you. I just assumed, based on the attendees for the previous sessions, majority of the ones attending the free classes here are nurses. That's why let's focus on what you're supposed to get. If you're migrating to the United States of America targeting EB3, we recommend a safe score of 6. Why safe? Because US does not necessarily care what grade you are going to get in reading, for as long as your overall is 6.5 and your speaking is 7. So how do you get 6.5 overall? Aim for 7 in speaking, 6 in LRW. That will give you 6.5 overall band. What about nurses going to UK, Australia, New Zealand? It says here 7.0. So what's the equivalent? It's around 30. Later on, I'll show you the transmutation table. However, if you're a nurse targeting Ireland or Canada, 6.5 in writing is acceptable. So what's 6.5? Roughly 27. A while ago, I promised that I am going to show you the transmutation table. Now, let's take a look at this one. Okay, what did you notice? Kindly type your comment on the chat box. We always want our class to be participative and engaging. What did you notice? Academic band score equivalence versus general training band score equivalence. Haven't you noticed anything? There are 57 of you on Zoom, and I assume there are more people on Facebook Live. Anyone who would like to share his or her insights regarding the academic band score equivalence versus the general training band score equivalence? Anyone? No one? Are you kidding me? You have not noticed any disparity or difference? Or you're still typing? Maybe I'll wait for a few more seconds before I proceed. I just want someone. Okay, let's take a look at the comment of Jen. General requires highest scores. One moment. Let me just go back to that a bit. General requires highest score to get specific score than academic. Trisha said the scores for general training are usually higher. Shane is asking GT is more difficult. And then Tonette said you need higher score for general to have a higher band. Okay, let us begin with the basic principle in IELTS. The easier the material, the higher the band score equivalence. The more difficult the material, the lower the band score equivalence. So let's take a look at 7.0. Academic 7.0, 30 to 32. General training 7.0, 34 to 35. If that is the case, then it means to say that general training is easier. Why? Let's go back to the assumption in IELTS that if the material is easier, the band score equivalents are higher. So which one is higher, 30 to 32 or 34 to 35? Definitely 34 to 35, making general training easier than the academic. Now, someone asked me, sir, why are you giving us a range? Can't you give a definite equivalent? Like, what is 7? Is it 30? Is it 31 or 32? The truth is, I cannot tell you. Why? That is because not all reading passages have exactly the same level of difficulty. I'll give you an example. For an academic reading passage, if the material is difficult, then that means to say 7 is 30. However, for an academic reading passage which is easy, that means to say 7 becomes 32. That is why when you take the examination and you feel like anxiety is raining down on you because the material is so difficult, instead of looking at the glass half empty, why don't you look at this as half full? Why? There is hope if the material is more difficult because they adjust the band score equivalents and make them lower. It's just that sometimes people are dangerously overconfident, saying, you know what, that was just so easy. I am sure I'm going to get a higher band score. Not quite, because when the material is easy, what happens? That's when they make the band score equivalents higher. So what you see here on the screen is just what? A rough guide. Notice 5.5 is the lowest here. Question: what is the lowest grade in the reading subtest? Can someone tell me? What's the lowest grade? Anyone? How many of you now? Okay, 58. What is the lowest grade in reading? Can someone tell me? Okay, Jer said 5. What about the others? Is 5 the lowest in IELTS reading? Okay, Antoinette said 4. Thank you for responding. Jadely is correct. The lowest in reading is 1. Now you're going to say, huh? 1? Yes. When does the candidate get 1.0 in reading? This is when the candidate failed to get any correct answer. Or in the case of this former Niner reviewee in 2007, he failed to transfer the answers from the test booklet to the answer sheet. Remember, in listening, you're given 10 extra minutes to review your work and transfer your answers. But in the reading subtest, everything is incorporated in 1 hour. So when he finished answering question number 40, that excuse me, that was when he was about to transfer his answers to the answer sheet. But at the same time, that was when the test supervisor said, and 1 hour, submit your reading answer sheets. What happened to him? He got 1.0 simply because he was not able to write a single answer on the answer sheet. So now you understand why we don't recommend 20 minutes per passage. It is still ideal to spend 15 minutes per passage to give you extra time to review your work and transfer your answers. So JD, Ruby, both of you are correct. 1.0 is the lowest in reading. It's just that I won't give you the equivalence of 5 to 0 because no one here is aiming for 5 and lower. Even if you're only required 4 or 3.5, we want everyone to aim for the highest possible band score so that you can announce to the whole wide world, I am proficient in English. It's not just about passing. Sometimes it has something to do with self-esteem as well. Now, here's a question from Gretzel May. Possible interchange the answer sheet of listening and reading. Well, you have to be careful because in the actual examination, it clearly indicates if the answer sheet is for listening or for reading. So common sense is also important aside from preparation and mental toughness. Here's another question from Trisha Mariel. It was sent privately, so for the benefit of those who are not able to read it, I'll read it for you. Sir, what if we just need an academic exam but got the desired band score of 7 in speaking and not achieve 6.5 LRW? Can we move to general exam? Okay, I'm 100% certain I discussed this earlier. You cannot take the wrong module in the Ielts. So before you register for the exam, you talk to your recruitment agency or immigration agent or your visa consultant and ask what is the required module. Sometimes, especially if it's student visa application, there are schools that accept both academic and general training. So when this happens, I'd rather you go for general training because it's the easier module. So for Trisha Mariel, you cannot move to general if the requirement is academic. Now, let's continue. We go back to our screen. Let's move to the 3 easy steps to follow in the reading subtest. I'm sure some of you already have an idea, but let's hear it from you guys. Which step are you supposed to do first in the reading subtest? Kindly comment on the chat box. Before anything else, what are you supposed to do first in the reading subtest? Once again, I want to make sure that you are with me. So I'll wait for your responses, okay? So Kate said, read the questions first. Tonette, exactly the same, and so on. It's important that you read the questions first. Why? If you read the questions first, it will allow you to pay attention to the info that you need in the passage. Now, here is the general info that I want you to remember. In the reading subtest, there are more details that you do not need as compared to the details that you need. Let's go back to what we talked about earlier. One passage up to 1,500 words for academic. But out of 1,500 words, how many answers do you need? Just 13 to 14, which means to say you will be needing what? Or there are more details that you don't need, that don't answer questions as compared to the details that you need. Now, if this is the case, what do we tell our candidates? If you don't read the questions ahead of time, then you don't have an idea what you're supposed to find in the passage. So reading the questions ahead of time will allow you to be more discerning. Which info do I need and which info is irrelevant? Now, after reading the questions, which one do you think are you supposed to do next? So we're done with step 1. Read the questions first. What do you think must be step number 2? Anyone? What's step number 2, guys? 61 of you on Zoom. Okay, so Kate said, read the passage. Correct. This time, I need you to read the passage. But I'd like to show you something here on our screen. It says that step number 1 is to read the questions first. But Step number 2 states, read the passage, not just the first sentence, not just the last sentence, but it says the entire passage. Why do I insist that you read the entire passage? If you read books or references in the IELTS, if you watch popular instructors on YouTube, they will tell you, you don't have to read everything. In contrast, 9.09 encourages everyone to read the entire passage. Why? Remember, there is this type of question in reading, true, false, not given. Now, I'm going to argue, how will you know that the answer is not given if you don't read everything? The only way for you to know that the answer is not given is when you read the entire passage, because you can confidently say, I've read everything, and I'm sure that was not discussed in the passage. Therefore, the answer is not given. Let me clarify. I said read the entire passage, but I did not say absorb every word. I did not say try to understand everything. I just said read the entire passage. Now, let us continue. It says read the passage now with a better idea of what to look for and what the questions hinted at. Earlier, some of you perhaps have seen this one, and it says that it is best that you answer the questions while you are reading the passage, not after you read the passage. But you can do number 2 and number 3 simultaneously. Read the passage and stop the moment you find an answer. When you find an answer, go to the question to answer this. Why? So that later on, you don't have to think of that question anymore because you have answered it already. It's like when you're fishing. So imagine you are fishing. The moment you're able to catch a fish, what do you do with that fish? Do you throw it back into open waters, or are you going to get it? Obviously, you're going to get it because that's what you call a catch already. You don't want to let go of something that you've already caught or you've already found. So later, we're going to apply that to the passage, and hopefully all of you have a copy of the passage that we'll be using later for the guided reading exercise. Just in case you still do not have a copy of that passage, all you have to do is go to the Facebook page of IFNG and search for the free IELTS reading lecture of 9.09, or look at the comments section, and there you will find the 3 pages that we are going to use later for our guided exercise. So let's have a recap. Read the questions first in order for you to have an idea what to find in the passage. Step number 2 and step number 3 can be done simultaneously. Read the entire passage, not just portions of the passage, but the entire passage while you're answering the questions. Before I proceed, here is a question from Jojelyn Lachica. Hi, sir. Is it okay to write the answers directly on the answer sheet? No one is telling you that it's wrong. It's just that you don't want to submit an answer sheet with plenty of erasures. It simply looks untidy. So why answer immediately on the answer sheet when you have the test booklet for this purpose? So you underline, you encircle, you can do anything you want to do with the test booklet. But just make sure that later you'll be transferring the answers directly to the answer sheet. I will allow you, though, to answer immediately on the answer sheet if you can promise me that it wouldn't look very untidy, because what some people do, they keep on erasing because they keep on changing their minds. So hopefully I was able to answer your question, Jojelyn Lachica. Now, moving on. Okay. I guess I discussed this a bit earlier. You allot 15 minutes per passage. And you spend some time reviewing the answers for each passage and transferring the answers to the test booklet later in the last 15 minutes. What about the types of questions that come out exclusively in the reading subtest? Gap fill in the blanks, multiple choice. These are 2 types of questions that come out in both listening and reading. That's why if you're going to give us the opportunity to conduct another class next week, if you say yes, I'll do it. IELTS listening next week, because we're done with reading now, writing and speaking the last 3 Wednesdays. So hopefully, if you'll give me the chance, I'll discuss gap fill, I'll discuss multiple choice, accent familiarization next week. But for tonight, we're only going to focus on two types of questions. And what are they? Matching headings and true false not given. Why? Because these two come out exclusively in the reading subtest. Let's begin with the first one, matching headings. So in IELTS, you will notice that paragraphs are usually numbered or lettered. And then if you look at the questions, you will see certain headings there. It's very simple. You have to determine which of the following headings is appropriate for that particular paragraph. So that's the general concept. It's matching type. You match a paragraph to its corresponding heading and vice versa. However, I want you to know that there are two types of matching headings. And what are they? Let's take a look. The first one, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Okay, there you go. You choose a heading for the whole paragraph, meaning to say this heading is discussed not just in one sentence, but it is applicable for the entire paragraph. Sometimes there's an equal number of headings and paragraphs, like there are 7 paragraphs and there are 7 headings. And it is easier this way because you're 100% sure that all of the headings are answers for sure. But IELTS is not always a giveaway. There will be challenges. There are challenges in this examination. And sometimes to make it more confusing for the candidate, what IELTS does is to write more headings, provide you with more headings than the actual number of paragraphs. So for instance, there are only 7 paragraphs, but a total of 10 headings. So you have 3 fillers, which are added just to confuse you. So you have to be more careful if it's the second type, more headings than paragraphs. Now, let's take a look at the second type of matching headings. And it states that choose the paragraph that contains this information, which means to say, this heading is not discussed in the entire paragraph. Sometimes it's just talked about in the first sentence or the last sentence or somewhere in the middle. It's not the theme of the entire paragraph. So this is where it gets to be more mind-boggling for candidates. So later, when we move on to our passage, we're going to apply the techniques that we're about to discuss in the next few minutes. So there are 2 possible methods in answering matching headings. And what is the first one? For some people, they find this more effective. They read the heading first, and after that, that's when they look for the paragraph. When you read the heading, don't forget to identify the keyword because that is the keyword you're supposed to find in the passage. Well, if it's elementary or high school, the exact word in the heading is usually the exact word in the passage. But remember, IELTS assumes that most of you taking the examination, especially for those who want to advance their education in a first world country, or you're going to apply for permanent residency, or you want to work or you want to be registered in the professional, let's say, professional regulatory commission of that specific country. That's when IELTS wants to make sure that your vocabulary is wide and that you are able to comprehend, which means to say, do not expect that the heading in the question, or rather the word, the keyword in the heading is always the exact word that you will find in the passage. And I'll prove that later on when we go to our guided exercise. Here's a tip. Sometimes the keywords are usually found in the main idea containing topic sentences, the first and the last. It's just that there are also instances when the keywords are found in the middle. You might want to start with the first and last sentence, but sometimes they're in the middle. Other people find the second method more effective for them. And what do? Before they read the heading, they read the paragraph first. And after reading the paragraph, now they have a better idea of what is talked about or what is discussed for that paragraph. It's much easier for them to pick a heading. Now, I'd like to remind you, I do not necessarily recommend the first method over the second or the second over the first. If you're a beginner, I want you to do it this way, trial and error. First reading practice, try to apply the first method. Next reading practice, try to apply the second method. And after 2 exercises, you decide which one is easier. Is it the first or the second? Which one is more effective for me? Remember, one technique might be more effective for another, but not applicable for another person. So you find the technique that will help you in maximizing your potential of acing the examination. Now, what about some notes? For matching headings. Number 1, before you move on to the next paragraph, make sure to identify the heading of the present paragraph so that if you get it right, you don't have to go back to that paragraph anymore later on. You're simply done with that. Now, here's another tip. It is best that you do the easiest matches first because that will reduce the number of paragraphs and the number of headings. Now, the most difficult to identify should be answered last. Why? Imagine if you have 7 paragraphs. So paragraph number 5, that's the only one without a partner. And then you have 7 headings. So let's say heading letter E is the only one without a partner. So what does that mean? If you only have 1 paragraph and 1 heading without any partner, so chances are they are the partners. That's why it states here, usually the unmatched item is the unmatched items are the partners. Lastly, it says you constantly recheck your work. Honestly, between the two, matching headings and true false not given is more challenging. So now let's take a look at true false not given. I want to remind you, they don't always use true, false, not given all the time. Sometimes the instruction tells you write yes, no, not given, or sometimes accurate, inaccurate, not given. I vividly remembered that reviewee who did not follow the instruction. After taking the test, she messaged me and she said confidently, oh, sir, you know what? I'm 100% sure I'm going to get at least 7 in reading. Then I told her, wow, good for you. After the examination, here she is messaging me and said, sir, it's unbelievable. How come I only got a 5.5 in reading when I am certain that I got more correct answers than the ones which are wrong? So that was when she filed for EOR or recheck. And then when the results came back, nothing changed. The truth is what this person wrote was yes, no, not given instead of true, false, not given. I know the true and yes are related to each other, but yes is yes, true is true, and you cannot write yes if you're supposed to write true. So you always need to follow the instructions. Be careful because sometimes that spells the difference between making it and repeating the examination. What's the concept of true, false, not given? Remember, when we were in high school, all you have to do is to determine, is this statement accurate or does it contradict the fact? Well, it's easier that way because if it's not true, obviously it's false. In IELTS, there is a very thin line that separates false and not given. And this is what we hope to achieve for tonight. The enlightenment, the crystallization, the eureka moment. So that when you do your next reading practice test, you are more equipped, you are more confident. It is insurmountable if no one is there to guide you. However, if someone is there to tell you what you're supposed to do, if you employ test-taking strategies that are effective, then nothing is difficult or insurmountable in the end. Now, most of the time, people are confused between false and not given. So let's start with something that is easy, and that's true. So what notes do we have here? It's best that you read the statement first, because if you have an idea what the statement is, it's much easier to find that in the passage, because that is the statement that you're going to find in the passage later. You can try to look for the keywords. Sometimes you won't find the exact keyword, but related words or synonyms. Now, I initially told you the true is okay. True is the easiest to identify, but before that, I still have some lines here. The moment you find the statement in the passage, you carefully identify this is true, false, or not given. Now, when you finish reading the entire passage and you cannot find that statement in the passage, it could only mean two things. Number one, the answer is not given or you missed the answer. So you have to be actively involved while you are reading. The problem in the reading subtest is what? We are mentally preoccupied most of the time. We lose our focus. We have a short attention span. Say, for instance, tonight you're supposed to be here listening to our discussion of the reading subtest. But who knows? Some of you might be thinking of what time you're going to bed later on, or what time you're going to set your alarm for tomorrow. You cannot have short attention span in the reading subtest, most especially because your future is at stake here. Now, I want to remind you that the answers for true, false, not given are usually found chronologically in the passage. What does chronological mean? For instance, you have 7 true, false, not given given questions. Where are you supposed to find the answer for number 1? Somewhere in the first part. I am not saying the answer for number 1 is always in the first paragraph or always in the first sentence of the first paragraph. But what I'm saying is it's somewhere in the first part. It's possible that the answer for number 1 is on the second paragraph. But if that is the case, definitely there is no answer for any true, false, not given question in the first paragraph. Now, if number 7 is the last of the true, false, not given questions, where are you likely to find the answer for number 7? Towards the end of the passage. It doesn't have to be the last sentence of the passage. It doesn't mean it's always the last paragraph. What I'm saying is it's towards the end. So most likely you're going to find the answer to number 1 first, followed by number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on. Now, I'll give you a scenario. What if you're able to find the answer for number 1? That means to say anytime soon, which number are we going to answer? Kindly comment on the chat box. I have not asked you a question for quite some time. What if, okay, thank you, Jeanette. So I asked, what if we've already found the answer to number 1? So that means to say anytime soon, it's number 2 that we are going to answer. Thank you, Jazz. But I have a question for you. What if after number 1, the next true, false, not given question.
Ha? 8-4 naman ngayon. 8-4.
Okay. Where was I?
I
was
Go on.
I was saying something about if we're able to answer number 1 and the next answer that we find is number 3, what does this mean? Okay. Can someone tell me? If we usually find the answers chronologically in the passage, we found the answer for number 1, then we're answering number 3 next. Something's fishy, right? What's wrong? Okay. So Anne said 2 is not given. Now here are the 2 possibilities. What if you've answered number 1 and then you've answered number 3? What I need you to do is to go back to the portion in between 1 and 3, because somewhere in between there you will find the answer to number 2. So this is easier for us now because it gives us an idea on where to find the answer. It's not as if it will just ask you to randomly find the answer in the 1,500 words. No, you have a guide. So the answer for number 2 is definitely found in between 1 and 3. But what if you already went back to that portion, but you still cannot find the answer to number 2 in between 1 and 3? Anne is correct. I can confidently look at you in the eye and tell you that number 2 is not given. Why? Remember that answers are found chronologically 99% of the time. Because number 2 is not discussed in between 1 and 3, number 2 is not given. And I will prove that to you when we go to the passage later on. Now, let's begin with true. Let's move down. Okay. It states here P and S. So what's P? That's the passage. S, that's the statement. So the passage and the statement have exactly the same idea, but don't always expect that exactly the same words appear in the passage and in the statement. For it is possible that the words in the passage are not exactly the same words in the statement. Now let's take a look at the passage, and I have underlined certain keywords here. Passage. In the world today, there are at least 1 million students learning English abroad. Can someone tell me on the chat box, what is the meaning of at least? Guys, what is the meaning of at least? It's important that we understand these two words. Okay, thank you, Steph. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Jazz, Marian, Tonette. Well, not more or less, but minimum. Because when you say more or less, it could be more than 1 million, it could be less than 1 million. So at least is not the same as more or less. But the meaning of at least is minimum. Meaning to say it could be 1,000,001, 1,000,002, but it's never 999,000 and below. What about the statement? Here are the exact words. There are more than 1 million students studying the English language in another country. So at least minimum of 1 million. More than 1 million is also minimum of 1 million. That means to say the passage and the statement are what? Consistent with each other. The answer is true even if they don't use exactly the same words. But because they have the same idea, the answer is indeed true. Now, let's take a look at, okay, well, here's a comment. Almost. Guys, almost is actually the opposite of 1 million. Why? To give you an idea, what is almost 1 million? 998,000, 999,000. That's almost 1 million. But when you say at least 1 million, it's 1,000,001, 1,000,002, 1,000,003. That's why I am here to tell you that, yeah, we know how to read, but sometimes it's how we comprehend that spells the difference between getting the required math score and repeating the examination. But we know for a fact that this examination is very expensive. Right now in the Philippines, it's 11,650 pesos, and that's a fortune in this country. So our goal is one shot, one kill. What does this mean? If this is not your first IELTS, we have to do everything. We will help together to make this your last IELTS. Now, people are asking me, sir, will you please help me to pass the examination? Oh, definitely, we'll give you effective strategies. But remember, it is our duty to teach, but it is your duty to learn. You have to make sure that you practice in order to apply what we have learned, okay? Now, let's take a look at the second reason why we say the answer is true. Here we go. The passage and the statement might have different ideas. But even if they're different, if they are still in line with each other, the answer is still true. So I'll show you the passage and the statement examples. Passage. Students of the same nationality make similar study choices. They make the same, okay, not different choices. In the statement, in the main, students follow the pattern of study for their national group. So come to think of it. If students make the same choice, does it mean they follow the pattern? Most likely, yes. Why? They make the same choice, meaning to say there is a singular pattern that they are what? Conforming to or obeying. Now, this is the reason why true is the easiest to identify because it's 100% accurate. Now, let us move on to false and not given. So while I move down, Antoinette said PNP, practice and prayers. Amen. No one can argue against that. Now let's move on to false. Passage and statement are opposites. If you've noticed, I'm using exactly the same example this time, but I just changed one word for you to notice the difference. So earlier, passage at least. Now in the passage at most. So will you please comment on the chat box? What is the meaning of at most? Thank you, Jazz. Thank you, Steph. Maximum. So almost 1 million, at most 1 million, maximum of 1 million, all those are consistent. Okay. Now, if you look at the statement, that's exactly the same example earlier, more than 1 million. So passage, meaning to say less than 1 million. Statement, more than 1 million. Less than versus more than, exact opposites. Therefore, the answer is false. Now, there are two more reasons why we say the answer is false. Here we go. The passage and statement are not consistent with each other. In the passage, it states, study destination choices are influenced by proximity to home. What about the statement? Numerous studies conducted in Britain and the United States show that the country of choice depends to a large extent on economic factors. So you will notice there is a factor mentioned in the passage and in the statement. It's just that these factors are not entirely the same. The factor in the passage is proximity. The factor in the statement is economic. They're not consistent. They're not necessarily opposites, but because they are not the same, the answer is still false. Now, if you're sleepy earlier, if you're bored earlier, I need you to snap out of it, because the next one is the reason why a lot of people are not able to get the correct answer. The answer is false if the statement lacks information. We're saying that something's missing. And what exactly do I mean by that? In the passage, you will find 3 details. However, in the statement, only 2 details. What about the example? We're going to count. Passage. The lab card shows the student's name, course, and number. What about the statement? The lab card shows only the student's name and number. Some of you are going to argue, sir, the answer here is true. And I ask, how come it's true? Well, they reply, sir, name and number are both found in the passage. That's why this is true. Well, I hate to break it down to you, but the answer is false because the statement is not entirely accurate. It lacks information. And what is this missing information? You can find in the passage, but you cannot find in the statement. It is the course. Thank you, Jazz. No course in the statement. That's why the answer is false. So you have to be wide awake when you are reading and when you are answering. Okay? Guys, I have a question for you. What is our goal in the reading subtest? Answer. Can you tell me on the chat box, what is our ultimate goal in the reading subtest? Comment. Okay, I understand that Alexandra is targeting 7.5, but what I mean to say really is, what is our goal? Okay, our goal while we are reading. So for Anne, she said comprehension. Okay, I beg to disagree because you don't have to understand the portions that don't contain answers. How will you know if there is no answer? And that is the point where you have to read the questions beforehand. If you read this portion of the passage and you know for a fact that it does not contain any answer, you don't have to comprehend it anymore. Why? Simply because there is no answer. I'd like to agree with Steph. And what is this? It's to answer the question. I don't mind if there are certain parts that you don't understand. I don't even care if there are certain parts that you fail to absorb, especially if they don't contain answers. Is your goal to understand, or is your goal to be happy while you're reading? Say, for instance, oh my God, I love what I'm reading. I'm going to purchase a passage similar to this because I love this. Simply, it makes me happy. No. To be happy is not the objective of the reading subtest. What is the objective? Just to find the answers. Class, that's why you have to be wide awake when you are reading. Thank you, Mimi. Yes, you just have to answer the question correctly, not necessarily enjoying what you are reading. Let's have a recap. What are the 3 reasons why we say the answer is false? Number 1, Passage and statement are exact opposites. Number 2, passage and statement contradict each other. Rather, they are not consistent with each other. And number 3, the statement is not complete because it lacks certain information. Now, we move on to not given. Okay, the first reason why the answer is not given is because you cannot find it in the passage. How are you going to say it's not given? Well, you read everything and you know that the answer is not given because you can confidently say it's not given because you've read everything and you are certain that there is no portion of the passage that discusses this information. So I reiterate, read the entire passage, but you don't have to understand every single word. Another reason why the answer is not given. What does this say? If the statement has an extra information, an added detail, that's when we say the answer is not given. Look at the passage. It states, the lab card shows the student's name, course, and number. So 3 details. What about the statement? The lab card shows the student's name, course, number, and year level. Some people say, sir, this is true. And I ask them, why is this true? They tell me, well, name, course, number, all 3 of them are found in the passage. Okay, you are right. But in Ielts, that is not true. Simply because there is a detail which makes the statement inaccurate. Or someone told me, sir, this is false. And I asked, how come you're saying that this is false? The response of the person, well, the answer is false because year level is not mentioned in the passage. Therefore, the statement is inaccurate, making it false. Okay, if it's the elementary or high school type of true or false question, you are right, that is false. But in Ielts, that's exactly the point of not given. The moment there is an added info, this extra detail will totally make the statement not given, even if the other details in the statement agree or contradict with the passage. So once again, what are the 2 reasons for us to say that the answer is not given? Number 1, you cannot find that info in the passage. Or number 2, that detail might be in the passage, but because the statement has an extra info, that will totally make the answer not given. So before we go to the examples, we have certain questions here from Alexandra. If there are many words in the passage that we don't understand, how will we be sure that we answer the questions correctly? Okay, instead of answering this directly, someone asked me, sir, how long is the ideal time to prepare for Ielts? What do you think? Before I answer the question of Alexandra, how long is the ideal time to prepare for Ielts? I'll wait for your answers. How long is the ideal time to prepare for the Ielts? When should you start preparing for Ielts? I may rephrase the question. Okay, so GT said 6 weeks. What about the others? Okay, others, 3 months, 3 months. Now, if I may be very blunt, okay, it's like this. IELTS preparation does not start today. It won't start tomorrow. IELTS preparation should have started the moment you learned English. Now, the point being, I met my favorite IELTS examiner a few years ago. She's Professor Rosella Torrecampo of UP Diliman, College of Arts and Letters. And then I told her my dilemma as an IELTS instructor. Sometimes I feel sorry for the candidates who are really behind, and chances are they might not get the required band score. But if I may use the exact words that I learned from my idol, for me, the best IELTS examiner, here's what I learned from her. And if I may quote her, she said, Irvin, you do not put the burden of the entire educational system on your shoulder. You are not their elementary teacher. You are not their high school teacher. You are here to inform them what are the effective tips in answering the different types of questions in IELTS, but you do not put the burden entirely on your shoulder. You have to, they have to do their part, which means to say, if I go back to that question that was asked earlier, what if there are certain words I cannot understand? I'll throw the question back at you. What are you supposed to do? As early as now, you have to build your vocabulary. Why? Because if you build your vocabulary, more words you understand, the easier for you to determine the answers in the reading subtest. But sometimes it's a matter of luck. Yes, I believe in God, but I just want you to know that sometimes you just got lucky. There are certain parts that you don't understand. It's totally fine if you don't understand that part, most especially that part does not contain any answer. But for the parts that contain answer, that's when you must pray to the gods in heaven that you understand the words here. You just have to pray that the stars will align. If it's written in the palm of your hands that you will pass the examination, then this is when you must understand all the parts that contain answers. But don't feel so bad if there are certain portions which you misunderstood or cannot comprehend. It's totally fine, especially if they don't contain any answers. So this is the point why you have to read the questions beforehand. Okay, so according to Sakshi, depends on the person's knowledge. Yes, correct. So it's not as if there is a generic preparation time. Like we do not say in 1 week you will pass the exam. No such thing as that. So we tell the students, depending on your proficiency level and depending on your progress. But most IELTS candidates usually get the required band score in 2 to 3 months of preparation. Okay, so hopefully I was able to address that question politely. Now, are you ready to answer certain true false not given type of questions? Let me show it to you one by one. Okay, before I read, you can read it on your own. Let me just sip coffee. Okay, let's begin. Examples. The passage tells us the lab card shows the student's name, course, and number. Now, what about the statement? The lab card does not show the student's name, course, number, and year level. Ladies and gentlemen, future IELTS passers, will you please tell me, is the answer true, false, or not given? May I see your responses? There are 75 of you on Zoom. Okay, well, Tonette said false. Jazz said false. Kate said false. What about the 72? There are 75 of you. Thank you, Hazel Marie. Thank you, Sakshi. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Vanessa. The answer is not given. Why is the answer not given? It's simple. Look at the passage. There are 3 details, right? In the statement, 4 details. You might want to argue, the statement actually contradicts the passage. I know that. They're exact opposites, right? However, even if they are exact opposites, but just because there's an added info in the statement, that will totally make the answer not given. Correct. Thank you, Marian, and thank you, Jazz, for explaining to your classmates. Although they are opposite, there is an added info that makes the answer not given. Okay. If you got 1 out of 1, very good. If you got 0 out of 1, nothing to worry. You can redeem yourself by doing better in the next few examples. So here we go. We're going to, we have total 4 examples. Now let's move on to example number 2. Passage. There are subversive elements in children's literature. The statement tells us adults often fail to recognize the subversive elements in books their children read. Once again, people of the world, future IELTS passers, what's the correct answer here? Is it true, false, or not given? Okay, Steph, not given. Tonette, false. Wait a minute, how come you guys are not consistent? There are those who answered false, there are those who answered not given. Well, so far, no one answered true. Okay, the correct answer is, drum roll, the correct answer is not given. Now, may I ask you, can someone tell me, or your classmates, why is the answer not given? Anyone? Kindly type on the chat box, what is the extra information, the added information? Okay, Marian White, adults, class. Let's do, okay, thank you, Steph. The adults who fail to recognize. So it's not just adults per se, but the phrase adults often fail to recognize. Let's take a look at this closely. Subversive elements, subversive elements. Exactly the same words found in the passage and in the statement. What about children's literature? The passage uses children's literature, but in the statement, the words used are books their children read. It's just that the extra detail, the added info adults often fail to recognize is something you will never find in the passage. Therefore, the answer is not given. If you're 2 out of 2, go, go, go for 9.0. If you are 1 out of 2, at least you got a correct answer. If your answer is 0, if you got so far 0 out of 2, nothing to worry. You have 2 more chances at redeeming yourself. Now, let's move on to example number 3. Guys, passage. There is an unrealistic view of money in children's literature. Statement. There should be a more realistic view of money in children's literature. So, is it true or false or not given? You only have 3 options. I'll wait for your answers to appear on the chat box. Okay, false, 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 true, false. I'm not stopping yet because I have not seen the correct answer yet. So that should give any. Thank you, Steph. The answer is not given. And the others are saying, what? It's not given? How come it's not given? Let's do it this way. View of money in children's literature, exactly the same words in the passage and in the statement. Now, passage unrealistic, statement realistic. Looking at the 2 of them, it seems that the answer is false, right? Because they look like they are not consistent with each other. It's just that I argue that there should be a more. That's the added info which makes the statement not given. The imposition that there has to be, that is the reason why the answer is not given. Okay, so if you're 3 out of 3, 1 more example to get the perfect grade. However, if you're 0 out of 3, I would rather that you look for a fiance or a spouse, because if you're applying for fiance or spouse visa, then all you need in IELTS is 4.0. Kidding aside, if you are taken already, you just have to make sure that you learn from your mistakes here. Why? I want you to know whatever score you get in the practice will not determine whether you are going to get that visa or not. All of you, for all of you, there is only one examination that matters, and that's the actual reading test. Whatever scores you get in your practice tests don't matter. It's fine to commit mistakes during the review. What's more important, you learn from these mistakes and apply them in the actual examination. Thank you, Tonette. Learn from the mistakes. GT, love it. I'm not sure if GT said loving it to learning from your mistakes, or saying loving it to looking for a fiance or a spouse. Char. Now, let's move on to the last. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. At least when you're at least I know you're still wide awake at 10:15 p.m. Philippine time. Okay, last. Passage. Inland freight in United Kingdom is carried by road. Statement: inland freight in United Kingdom is not carried by water. Carried by road versus not carried by water. True, false, or not given? Okay, thank you. Everyone got it correctly. The answer is not given, simply because the passage does not say anything about water. Someone told me, sir, this is my philosophy. If it's carried by road, for sure it is not carried by water. And I said, how assuming of you. Remember, it's not always road and water, right? There are other means or other methods, say for instance, air. Thank you, Marian. There's air. You don't assume. So this is what you're going to do in the reading subtest. You analyze, but you don't misinterpret, okay? So for all the 4 examples, it's very simple. Just remember that the answer is not given. Now, will you please go to the passage? I hope everyone has a copy of the passage, because if you don't have, then you just have to rely on the screen. Okay, I'll give you the next few seconds to prepare the passage in case you don't have a copy of it yet. It's on the Facebook page of IFNG. Just look for that post mentioning free IELTS reading lecture courtesy of 9.09er, and you see there 3 passages. Okay. Okay. Reading passage 1, questions 1 to 12. I hope that you have a piece of paper with you, or if you have a computer, a laptop, or a gadget, just type 1 to 12. Okay, so that will serve as your answer sheet. This is the guided exercise that we're going to do together. Don't read ahead. Okay, let's wait for your classmates. Now, if I may read the instruction, you are advised to spend 20 minutes on questions 1 to 12. The passage, destinations for international English students. Class, what is the first step in the reading subtest? The first step is to, what's our first step? Okay, read the questions. That's why. Let's go to the next page to read the questions. Okay. One moment. There. Questions 1 to 6. You're advised to spend about 5 minutes on questions 1 to 6. Choose the most suitable heading from the list of headings below for the 7 paragraphs of reading passage 1, destinations for international English students. Write your answers in boxes 1 to 6 on your answer sheet. List of headings: A, B, C, D, E, F, G. One by one, let us identify the keyword or keywords in each of the headings. So, letter A, heterogeneity in the language classroom. Kindly tell me, what's the keyword for letter A? Heterogeneity in the language classroom. Keyword, please, for letter A. Maybe you're still typing, but I want you to participate. Okay, White said heterogeneity. Correct. May I ask you guys, what's the meaning of heterogeneity? What is the root word here? Hetero. Okay, just in case you forgot about heterogeneity, what I want you to do is to think of something that you can relate well with. Say, for instance, heterosexual versus homosexual. So homosexual meaning to say same sex. Heterosexual, opposite, mixed. Therefore, for the word heterogeneity, I want you to know sometimes it's the exact word you will find in the passage. It's just that there are times when you cannot find the exact word in the passage. Now, kindly tell me, what are other words that you might possibly encounter in the passage related to the word heterogeneity? Okay. Vanessa said different. Steph said mixed. Apart from different and mixed, what are, yes, thank you, Jer, diverse. What else? It could be variety. Okay, now let's move on to letter B, enrollment demand in Australia and New Zealand. Tell me, what is the keywords for letter B? Keywords for letter B, enrollment demand, meaning to say more and more students are planning to go to Australia and New Zealand to study there. Let's continue. We move on to letter C, reasons for the choice of destination. Keyword, main keyword for letter C, reasons for the choice of destination. Thank you, reasons. Meaning to say, what are the factors that parents and students alike use before they decide where to go to, where to pursue further education? Correct. What about letter D? The attractions of studying in the antipodes. Letter D, attractions of studying in the antipodes. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Hazel. Attractions. Why is it that students are planning to go to the antipodes? Later, when we read the passage, we'll encounter the exact word antipodes, and I'll explain to you what is the meaning of the word antipodes. Let's forget about letter E, the conclusion, because that's the answer in the example. Moving on to letter F, additional student sources. Main keyword for letter F. Okay, sources. Thank you for that, but I'd like to believe it's more of additional. Meaning to say, it's possible that in other paragraphs, sources have been mentioned, but the focus of this paragraph is the added source, not just the main source, but the other sources. And for letter G, destination. So if F talks about where they came from, letter G talks about where they are going to. Let's now move on to 7 to 12. Questions 7 to 12. You are advised to spend about 10 minutes on questions. Oh, sorry, that's a typo error. That's 7 to 12 right there. Refer to reading passage 1, destinations for international English students, and look at the statements below. Write your answers in boxes 7 to 12 of your answer sheet. So true, false, not given. Not yes, no, not given. Not accurate, inaccurate, not given. Let's begin with number 7. Study destination choices are mostly influenced by proximity to home. What are the main keywords for number 7? Keywords for number 7, please. Keywords for number 7. Okay, proximity to home, which means to say, what are the two possibilities in the passage? If the passage tells us, well, primarily they're influenced by proximity, that's when we say the answer is true. However, if the passage tells us that they're influenced by some other factors, but not proximity, that's when we say it's false. However, if we cannot find this in the passage or there is an added detail, that's when the answer is not given. Question, where do we find the answer for number 7? Where do we find the answer for number 7? Where do we find the answer for number 7? I've mentioned that earlier. Most likely the answer for number 7 is found, okay, top part. Okay, I'm not necessarily saying it's the first paragraph or the first sentence. What I'm saying is it's found at the top part. Now, let's move on to number 8. Students who wish to study business will probably study English overseas. Keywords for number 8. Students who wish to study business will probably study English overseas. Keywords for number 8. I'll give you time while you're still typing. Keywords for number 8. study English overseas. So you have to pay attention to either of the two in the passage. Either they're going to study English in a different country, or they're going to study English at home. If ever the passage does not talk about this, or there's an added detail, that's when we say it's not given. I'm not rushing when I teach. I take it nice and slow because I want to make sure that everyone understands what we're talking about. Now, let's move on to number 9. Students of the same nationality usually make similar study choices. Students of the same nationality usually make similar study choices. Keywords for number 9. Keywords for number 9. Okay. Similar study choices. So the detail that you have to pay attention to later, are they making the same choice or different choices? Now, let's move on to number 10. English language classrooms in the US have the widest range of student nationalities. English language classrooms in the US have the widest range of student nationalities. Keywords for number 10. Widest range. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, CF. Chances are the passage will tell us that US has the widest or the most limited range. We're down to the last two questions. Number 11. Standards at Australian and New Zealand tertiary institutions are improving. Okay, number 11, main keyword, please. Okay, improving. The two possibilities in the passage, the standards are going up or the standards are going down. Lastly, number 12, despite the 1990s Asian economic crisis, Asian students still dominate the English language classrooms of Australia and New Zealand. Was the answer for number 12? What are the keywords for number 12? Still dominate. So ask yourself, who are the ones dominating the classrooms, the English classrooms of Australia and New Zealand? The Asians or not the Asians anymore? Now, we're done reading all the questions. We have a better idea of which info to find in the passage. After reading all the questions, what is step number 2 in the reading subtest? What is step number 2 after reading the questions? Step number 2 after reading the questions. Thank you so much, Jade Lee, and the rest of you. This is when we read the entire passage, not just a portion, but the entire passage. Okay, I'll go back to paragraph 1. Here we go. Paragraph 1. At any given time, more than 1 million international students around the world are engaged in the study of the English language in a predominantly English-speaking country. Stop. We don't need to pay attention to that sentence because it does not contain any answer. How do we know that it does not contain an answer? That's the point why you have to read the questions beforehand. We know for a fact that what we are looking for is not in this sentence, so why do we have to digest it? Forget about that sentence. We move on to the next sentence. Here we go. The 5 most popular destinations in order of popularity are
Hello, Sir Irvin. I think we're having a technical difficulty, so let's just wait for Sir Irvin. Sir Irvin, you're muted.
on check my I think it's my internet connection. But
Yes.
anyway, I'll just share my screen. Hello, hello. Okay, I'm back. Okay, now kindly tell me, which number are we answering? Is it a true, false, not given question or a matching heading? The clue is the 5 most popular destinations in order of popularity are the US, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Thank you so much for those who responded. Actually, we can identify the heading right now. So kindly look at the headings and tell me what is the correct answer for number 1. For paragraph 1, it's letter. For paragraph 1, it's letter G. Thank you so much, because the 5 destinations are enumerated in the first paragraph, second line. So on your answer sheet, kindly write capital G. Let's continue so as not to waste time. The reasons for choosing to study English abroad differ with each individual, as do the reasons for the choice of destination. Like the first sentence, the third sentence does not contain any answer. So let's just forget about it. We move on, and we're going to focus on our objective. And what's our main objective here? To understand, not to understand what we are reading, but to find the answers. Now, paragraph number 2. Numerous studies conducted in Britain and the United States show that the country of choice depends to a large extent on economic factors. Now, ask yourself, well, there's an answer here. Is it a heading or true, false, not given type of question that we are answering? So kindly look at the headings, kindly look at true, false, not given, and tell me on the chat box, which number are we answering with this part of the passage? Numerous studies conducted in Britain and the United States show that the country of choice depends to a large extent on economic factors. I'm waiting. Question number 7. Why question number 7? Let's take a look at that. It says that study destination choices are mostly influenced by proximity to home. The passage tells us it's economic factors that mostly influence the study destination choice. It's just that in number 7, it says no, not economic factors, but proximity to home, which means to say, what's the answer for number 7? What's the answer for number 7? The answer is false, because the passage and the statement are not consistent with each other. So on your answer sheet, write F for number 7. What did I say earlier? That the answers for true, false, not given appear chronologically in the passage. And that's consistent with what we talked about earlier. It's number 7 that we are answering first among the true, false, not given questions. Because we're done with number 7 anytime soon, we must find the answer for number 8. Without further ado, let's proceed. So paragraph number 2. While this should not provoke much surprise, careful analysis of the data suggests that students and their parents are mostly influenced by the preconceptions they have of the countries considered for study abroad. Let me stop right there. There is no new answer here, but that portion, influenced by the preconceptions, only verifies that the answer for number 7 is really false. Because so far, the passage tells us 2 reasons, namely economic factors and number 2, preconceptions. But still, the passage did not tell us or does not say anything that proximity to home is primarily the one influencing the study destination choice, which only means the answer for number 7 is really false. Let's continue. Which in turn influence the amount they or their parents are prepared to outlay for the experience. The strength of the international business connections between countries also gives a good indication of where students will seek tuition. Stop. You will notice that this line does not contain a new answer, but it only supports the answer for number 7, which is false. Because so far, the passage tells us 3 factors that are considered before someone chooses a destination. And what are these so far? Number 1, economic. Number 2, preconceptions. And number 3, international business connections. Having read all those 3 sentences, now we can carefully identify the heading for paragraph number 2. Look at the headings and what do you call? Economic factors, preconceptions, and international business connections. Thank you, GT. Thank you, Jade Lee. Thank you, Joyce. That's letter C. The 3 are actually the reasons for the choice of destination. So on your answer sheet, don't forget to write letter C for number 2. Let's move on. Last sentence, paragraph number 2. In the main, students tend to follow the traditional pattern of study for their national group. Aha, there is another answer here. Most likely not the heading anymore because we have just identified the heading. So your clue, it's a true, false, not given question. We are done with number 7. So kindly look at the other true, false, not given questions and kindly comment on the chat box. Which true, false, not given question are we answering right now? It's number okay. Students tend to follow the traditional pattern of study for their national group. Thank you so much to those who responded. 9. Number 9 tells us students of the same nationality usually make similar study choices, but the passage tells us they tend to follow the traditional pattern. Follow the pattern versus make the same choice. What's the answer to number 9? Follow the pattern versus make the same choice. Thank you, Tonette. Thank you, Steph, JD, Jaylee. The answer is true. Not exactly the same words, but they are consistent with each other. The answer is true. Now, on your answer sheet, write letter T for number 9. But wait a minute. Number 7, we've answered that. Number 9, we've found the answer as well. Something's fishy. Why? It seems to me that we missed the answer for number 8. So let's read number 8 once again. Students who wish to study business will probably study English overseas. Question, did you encounter something like that in between 7 and 9? Did you encounter students who wish to study business will probably study English overseas between 7 and 9? No. Therefore, what's the answer to number 8? The answer to number 8, thank you, Jazz, Steph, and so on. The answer is not given. Just because number 8 is not found in between 7 and 9, the answer is not given. So which detail is added there? Well, it says that yes, there are students who are going to study English overseas, but students who wish to study business, that's the added info, which makes number 8 not given. You see, even without finishing the passage, you can confidently say that the answer for number 8 is not given simply because 8 is not found in between 7 and 9. So we've answered number 7, we've answered number 8, and number 9, which means to say anytime soon, we're going to find the answer for number 10. Let's move on to paragraph number 3. The United States attracts the most diverse array of nationalities to its English language classrooms. Stop. I think there is another answer there. The United States attracts the most diverse array of nationalities to its English language classrooms. Thank you, Anne. It's number 10. So let's take a look at number 10. English language classrooms in the US have the widest range of student nationalities. Passage tells us most diverse. Number 10, widest range. Question, most diverse, widest range? Was the answer true? Thank you so much. Number 10 is consistent with the first line of paragraph 3. Therefore, the answer is true. Now, We've answered 4 true, false, not given questions. That means to say we're only down to the last 2, numbers 11 and 12. Now, let us go back to paragraph number 3, second line. This heterogeneity being largely due to its immense pulling power, blah, blah, blah. I guess we have to stop. Why? Simply because there's another answer. Is it a true, false, not given type of question? No, it's the heading, right? And if you look at the headings, the exact keyword is found here on the second line of paragraph 3, and that's letter A, heterogeneity. Class, what I need you to do right now is on number 3 of your answer sheet, write letter A and kindly count so far. How many questions have we answered out of 12? From 1 to 12, how many questions have we answered so far? From 1 to 12, how many questions have we answered so far? 7, right? So imagine if you did not stop, well, you found an answer. That's a waste of time. Because later on, you still have to look for the 7 answers. That's why the tip of 9.09, you stop the moment you find an answer, go immediately to that question and answer that before you proceed so that there is no turning back. You don't have to go back to the portions that you have answered already. So we only have 5 remaining answers to look for, but we still have a long way to go, which is an indicator that in the next few lines, in the next few paragraphs, there are more details that we don't need than the details that we actually need. And so let's continue reading. Here we go. Heterogeneity being largely due to its immense pulling power as the world's foremost economy and the resulting extensive focus on U.S. culture. Furthermore, throughout the not-European world, in Asia and North America especially, the course books used to teach English in most elementary and high schools introduce students to American English and the American accent from a very early age. Canada also benefits from worldwide North American exposure, but has the most homogeneous group of students, most with French as their first language. Before furthering their English skills, students in Europe study predominantly British English material. Most Europeans naturally opt for neighboring Britain, but many Asian, Middle Eastern, and African students decide upon the same route to stop. That's a very lengthy portion, but it does not contain any answer. That's why we did not stop from time to time. So you see, you are fortunate enough if there is a part that you don't understand, especially if that part does not contain any answer. You don't have to understand everything. You just need to make sure that you understand the portions that contain answers. Now, forget about that lengthy portion without any answer. Let's go to paragraph number 4. Australia and New Zealand are often overlooked, but hundreds of thousands of international students have discovered the delights of studying in the Southern Hemisphere. The majority are Asian for reasons that are not difficult to comprehend. Number 1, proximity of the 2 countries to Asia. Jakarta, the capital of Australia's closest Asian neighbor, Indonesia, is only 556 kilometers from Sydney. Number 2, the comparatively inexpensive cost of living and tuition. And number 3, perhaps of most importance to many Asian students whose English is a prelude to tertiary study, the growing awareness that courses at Antipodean universities and colleges are of an exceptionally high standard. May I reiterate the 3? Number 1, proximity. Number 2, inexpensive cost of living and tuition. And number 3, high standard. Ladies and gentlemen, I guess we can identify another answer. And what is that? Is it answering a true, false, not given, or a matching heading type of question? So far, 3 of your classmates have responded, indeed, it's a heading. Let's take a look at the headings that we have. What do we call? Proximity, inexpensive cost of living and tuition, and high standard. Definitely they are. The attractions of studying in the antipodes? Well, your clue, the word antipode, antipodian, antipodes, they have the same root word, right? So now, if you might be wondering, what's the meaning of antipodes? So the term antipodes is usually used in pertaining to Australia and New Zealand, the two countries down under. Okay, it's like when we say, what do we call the Philippines? The pearl of the Orient Seas. Australia in general, the land down under. What about Japan? Land of the rising sun. Korea, land of the morning calm. What about New Zealand? Land of the long white cloud. When you consider Australia and New Zealand together, they're called the antipodes. Okay, so that's an interesting trivia you might encounter in the future in your reading subtest. So we've answered the heading for paragraph 4, but there's another answer, not the heading anymore, but most likely for true false not given question. If you look at true false not given, we only have 11 and 12 left unanswered. So now kindly tell me, is it 11 or 12 that we're answering? I'll just read it once again. The growing awareness that courses at Antipodian universities and colleges are of an exceptionally high standard. Okay? What are universities and colleges? They are tertiary institutions, right? What about antipodes? Australia and New Zealand. Passage tells us high standard. Statement tells us improving standards. So thank you for telling me that it's number 11. But what is the answer for number 11? Is it true or false or not given? What's the answer for number 11? Jazz said true. Jade Lee true. True, 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 true. False. And so far, no one got it correctly because the answer is not given. And the others are saying, how come it's not given? The passage tells us that the standards are high. And in the statement, the standards are improving. Let me explain to you why the answer is not given. Let's take a look at this demonstration. How does high standard look like? Guys, this is high standard. High standard does not move. What about improving standard? This is how improving looks like. Something gets better and better every time. So high standard, what kind of standards are there? Improving standard, that means say the trend of the standard. Because the passage does not say anything about the trend of the standard, the answer for number 11 is not given. So that's tricky. Yes, high and improving are somehow related, but high and improving are not exactly the same. Just because the passage does not say anything about the trend of the standard, the answer is not given. So go back to your answer sheets. We only have number 12 as the remaining true, false, not given question unanswered, and 2 more headings to identify. Let's not waste time because we only have 11 minutes left before 11 p.m., the end of our free reading session. Let's continue. In addition, revised entry procedures for overseas students have made it possible for an increasing number to attend classes to improve their English for alternative reasons. No answer there, so forget about that portion of the passage. Let's go to paragraph number 5. Australia and New Zealand have roughly the same mix of students in their language classrooms, but not all students of English who choose these countries are from Asia. The emerging global consciousness of the late 20th century has meant that students from as far as Sweden and Brazil are choosing to combine a taste for exotic travel with a study of English down under and in the land of the long white cloud. Stop. There's an answer there. Definitely not number 12. So for sure, it's the heading. So kindly look at the headings. Only B and F are the remaining options. Is it B or F? So far, 3 of you answered F and you are correct. Additional student sources. The question is, Which places are considered to be the additional sources? Tell me, which places are the additional sources? Which places are the additional sources? Sweden and Brazil. That's right. Because there are primary sources, but this is your clue that they are considered the additional sources. The lines. Students from as far as Sweden and Brazil. So they're not the primary sources, but they're additional sources. Now, paragraph 6 is the only one without a partner. Heading B is the only one without a partner. So for number 6, will you please write letter B and then put an asterisk, meaning to say you are unsure. We're not saying that indeed B is the answer for number 6, but we're making an intelligent guess, not a wild guess, but this is some sort of a smart inference. Now, if B is not the heading for paragraph 6, something's wrong with our previous answers. But indeed, if B is the heading for paragraph 6, then we can confidently say we've aced the matching heading portion of this passage. Now, let us continue. But even the Asian economic downturn in the 1990s has not significantly altered the demographic composition of the majority of English language classrooms within the region. Guys, there's another answer, but for which number? 12. Thank you, Jazz. So for number 12, it says, despite the 1990s Asian economic crisis, Asian students still dominate the English language classrooms of Australia and New Zealand. The passage tells us, despite the economic downturn, there have been no significant changes. So before the downturn, Asians dominated. After the downturn, no significant alteration. So what's the answer to number 12? What's the answer to number 12? Asians dominated before the downturn. After the downturn, no significant changes. Thank you, Jade Lee. The answer is true. Why? If you go back to the passage, it tells us in the first line of paragraph 5, Australia and New Zealand have roughly the same mix of students in their language classrooms, but primarily the students are from Asia. Towards the end of the paragraph, despite the Asian crisis, there have been no alteration. So meaning to say they are consistent. Now, for number 12, that's the last true, false, not given question. It's true. Well, we have not reached paragraph 7 yet, but it seems we've answered all true, false, not given questions already. Number 7 was answered in the second paragraph, and number 12 was answered in the second to the last paragraph. We only have one unsure item, and that's number 6. So the only reason why we're going to continue reading is to find out if indeed B is the heading for paragraph number 6. Now, let's move on to paragraph number 6. Here we go. Nor have the economic problems in Asia, that's Asia, not Asians. Asia caused appreciable drops in full-time college and university attendances by Asian students in these two countries. This is partly because there has always been a, let me read this very slowly, greater demand for demand for enrollment at Australian and New Zealand tertiary institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are 100% sure that the answer for number 6 is letter B. Now, this is your passage. What do we do with the passage? We throw the passage. We don't need the passage anymore. What's the point of reading the rest of the passage when we are already confident that we found all the answers? Ladies and gentlemen, I have just presented to you the 15-year-old test-taking strategies of 9.09er in answering true, false, not given, and matching headings. So we only have 5 minutes left. Maybe If you have questions, you can type them on the chat box. But while you're typing these questions, allow me to take this golden opportunity to thank Sir Jeff, Miss Gladys, Sir Marvin of IFNG for consistently inviting 9.09er to a weekly class. We're done with speaking, writing task 2, writing task 1, and I hope that tonight I was able to enlighten you somehow on how you're going to address true, false, not given, and matching headings. It's just that do not expect that tomorrow onwards, you'll be getting 40 over 40 in reading all the time. Nothing happens overnight. Baby steps. For as long as we are on track, okay, as long as there is progress, any progress, whether small or big, is still progress. Okay? Now, here's a question. What if the passages are too long to read? What do you think? Who's going to adjust? Will the passage adjust? Who do you think should adjust? Because most of the time in the actual examination, 1,500 words per passage. That's why when people are too lazy, oh, it's too long. Remember, it's not as if USA is only considering you. You're just one of the thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people who want to go to the United States, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. They're not going to adjust just because of you. You are the one who is supposed to adjust. Okay? So you don't you have to read everything for you to confidently say that your answers are correct, but don't pay attention to the answers that don't pay attention to the portions that don't contain answers. So Jen, oh yeah, this is actually recorded, and right after this it will be shared on the Facebook page of IFNG. Well, you're welcome, Jazz. Please suggest to Miss Gladys and Sir Marvin if you are interested to talk about accent familiarization in listening, because that's what I'm hoping to discuss for next week. If you think that it will help you not just to pass, but to get a 9 in listening, we'll give in to that request and we'll be doing listening next week. But if you think that, okay, we've had enough of 9.09, we can manage. So you are our boss. Well, whatever you say, we're here to help you out. Okay?
All right, guys. So any questions? Oh, so do you want to have another lecture with our Niners instructors, most especially Sir Irvin, next week? May we see the comments? Oh, all right. So I think we have a unanimous vote.
Yes.
So they are even on Facebook.
Wait, I would like to say hi.
By the
Hello,
way, Sir
sir.
Jeff, this is
Hello,
Sir
Sir
Jeff.
Irvin.
Good evening po,
Yes,
sir.
good evening. And thanks for this opportunity. And yes, there's a lot of comments on our Facebook. I think it's public demand. So
Yeah.
we will see you next week.
All right.
Now,
So
Our pleasure.
you might be thinking, okay, we're done with listening, reading, writing, speaking. So what comes next? Well, I'm thinking, this is just me thinking out loud 2 weeks from now. Maybe I'll ask Sir Brian Martin Shawson, our instructor who got 9 in all the components too, talk about IELTS versus TOEFL versus PTE, because some of you might not be taking IELTS, some of you might go into the UK or Ireland where OET is the preferred English examination, or if you're going down under to Australia and New Zealand, PTE is the preferred English examination. So just thinking ahead, if there's this clamor for IELTS versus OET, PTE, that might be our topic 2 weeks from now, if you permit.
all right.
Okay.
So let's see if we can push through with the OET. Okay. So any last words, Sir Irvin, before we call it the night?
Nothing more.
Nothing more. Okay.
Well, I could say so to all our participants and viewers on Facebook. I think they're gonna nail the reading exam for sure with these informations that we got from the expert.
All right. Thank you, Sir Jeff. How about you, Mr. M?
Thank you, Sir Irvin, and thank you for tonight. And that's so very informative for us, especially for the reading.
All right.
Thank you
So,
for everyone at IFNG. Good
Okay,
night,
wait, there's a
Philippines. Good
question
night.
in our WhatsApp group, and it's on group 3. I will read it because you cannot see this. Wait, just hold on. Okay, how much for reading review in Niners? So I think you can visit their Facebook and send a direct message, right, Sir Irvin?
Yeah, so
yes.
that, well, I'm very responsive and everyone can attest to that. You can just message us directly. I'm not here to promote. I am here to share our knowledge and our tips for free. But if you think you'll be needing more from us, you can just message us directly. We're not here to hard sell.
All right. I think there's another question. Last question, Sir Irvin, before we call it the
Okay.
night. Wait, I'll just check it again on Facebook. It was. Hmm. Oh,
Mm.
no, I think they deleted it. Anyway, so I think that's it. So see you next week, Sir Irvin. So we're looking forward for your expertise with regard to that topic that you mentioned earlier. So thank you from the Philippines and good afternoon from the Middle East.
Okay,
So
more
Bye, everyone.
surprises for IFNG.
thank you, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Niners.
Good
Bye bye.
night,
Good evening.
everyone. Take
God
care.
bless.
Bye.
Salamat po.
Thank you.